The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. Without further ado, we would like to now hand over to counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chia to continue putting questions to the witness.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone in and around the courtroom again. To give everyone, including the witness, a sense of the plans of the defense today, I have discussed with my colleagues, and I plan to continue questioning until 3 o'clock, perhaps 3:15. Then hand over the floor to my colleagues, and we would have a request from the trial chamber, which I understand has already been granted, that the Kyosampan team would go first, to be followed by the Yengsari team afterwards. So that is the roadmap of this afternoon as far as we are concerned, and if that is not problematic, I will proceed with my questioning of the witness. Mr. Hun Chun Lee, before I start my questions, I want to make clear to you that my questions may seem at times difficult to answer, but what I'm trying to establish is your sources of knowledge, how you know certain information and when you found out about this. So I am not trying to indicate that I do not believe you. I'm simply trying to find out what you base your knowledge on. We have spoken about the evacuation of Battambang, and we have spoken about the Lon Nol soldiers, but you have also testified about the medical personnel at the military hospital, and you have stated that you understood, it was your understanding that it was the policy of the Khmer Rouge to kill military medical personnel of a certain rank. Very briefly to confirm, is that indeed what you testified earlier, that you understood that there was a policy to kill military medical personnel of a certain rank?
Response. After Khmer Rouge troop had entered Battambang provincial town, the Khmer Rouge had killed the 13 military personnel first.
Thank you. And did any Khmer Rouge soldier or official that this was a policy of the Khmer Rouge to kill all military medical personnel?
Response. Through my experience, Khmer Rouge did not only kill the military medical personnel, they also killed civilian medical personnel, but that only happened on or at a later date?
I have heard you say that before, that they have killed military medical personnel and civilian medical personnel. But my question is a different one. Who told you, or were you told by anyone, that it was a policy of the Khmer Rouge to kill military medical personnel? Did anyone tell you about the policy?
Response. This policy was not raised, but in real practical term, or in reality, that's what we saw happened.
So is it fair to say that based on what you saw happen around you, you assumed or concluded that there was a policy?
Response. I may say that it was part of the Khmer Rouge policy in executing the former military personnel, former military medical personnel and the civilian medical personnel and other intellectuals and educated people.
In translation, at least, you say that these killings were part of a policy of the Khmer Rouge. My question remains, is it fair to say that you assumed that there was such a policy based on what you saw happening around you?
Response. I think it was wrong to say that I presumed. I indeed did not speculate. There was nothing of speculation in my statement because I was testifying before the chamber based on what I saw. And that's what happened all across Cambodia at that time.
I will leave this for now. Perhaps my colleagues want to follow up on this later, but I am conscious of the time. You just stated that this was what was going on in Cambodia, all over Cambodia at the time. And I want to quote to you an excerpt from your book. It can be found on English ERN 00369675, and Khmer ERN is 00678751. And it is the prologue to your book, and you write, and I quote, "My book covers only Battambang town and 2 districts of Battambang province. In Battambang town, I worked in 2 Khmer Rouge regional hospitals, the military hospital and the civilian hospital. I don't know whether in other provinces the Khmer Rouge had called health staff of the old society to work in their hospitals and then had physically eliminated them." End of quote. So here you say that you don't know whether in other provinces the Khmer Rouge had called the health staff of the old society to work in their hospitals and then had physically eliminated them. Is it fair to say that you are not in a position to comment on what the Khmer Rouge policy was in Cambodia as a country at the time?
Response. What I was saying was that at Battambang, the Khmer Rouge asked that the medical staff work at the hospital, and later they were executed. I did not know whether they were executed altogether, but it happened to me that these individuals were executed one after another. The execution did take place.
I'm not talking about the executions in Battambang at the moment. I'm talking about something different. A few minutes ago, you stated that all this was part of a policy that was implemented in Cambodia nationwide. Just now, I read to you an excerpt in which you yourself indicated that you don't know whether in other provinces the Khmer Rouge had called health staff back to work in their hospitals and then had killed them. Is it fair, Mr. Witness, to say that you cannot comment on the policy that was in place in Cambodia at the time, simply because you did not experience it, you did not see it? You were confined to Battambang and to these 2 districts of Battambang province.
Response. You are correct to say that, and as what I wrote in my book, I knew that in Battambang the medical staff were asked to work but later on executed. I don't know whether these incidents also happened elsewhere as it did in Battambang.
Thank you. Yesterday, you spoke about the staff at the civilian hospital, and you stated, and you've stated this again today, that medical staff at the civilian hospitals were executed starting from 1977. You have already stated that you personally never witnessed an execution. Today, you also commented that some of these people, some of these staff members, were either sent to work in the fields or disappeared. Is it possible that some of the medical staff that was taken away or that was removed from the hospitals after 1977 was not executed, but, for example, was relocated to work in the fields, or possibly escaped the country after the fall of the Khmer Rouge?
Response. As to the civilian medical personnel, these people were asked to work as doctors at hospital at district level. There were 4 offices where these people were asked to work, and on the 30th of January 1977, order was made that these people had to move to the new location, and on the 31st, the following day, everyone had already been transferred to the new places, and we had to go to the cooperatives. And later on, we learned that each of them disappeared one after another, and the 2 of whose names appeared on the list of the prisoner at S21 was were indicated this morning. Some people had been asked to treat sick people, but they never returned. I learned about this because their spouses who survived the regime told me that their husbands would never come back.
Thank you. And then moving on to another disappearance of Mr. Siu Heng. In your book, when you speak about Mr. Siu Heng on page Khmer ERN 00678-758 and English ERN 00369-682, you state, "We received no more information but mouth-to-ear news spreading in the town. We heard that in Wat Kor commune, next to Batamang town, the Khmer Rouge soldiers collected into a military truck Mr. Siu Heng, who lay hemiplegic at home, and drove him away on the national road Batamang-Pailin." So you speak of mouth-to-ear news. And the same with the disappearance of Mr. Akar Sang. You answered initially that you had no idea who ordered the disappearance of Mr. Achar Sang. Is it fair to say that whatever you know about the disappearance of these two individuals, you know because of hearsay, because of word-of-mouth communications, or mouth-to-ear in your...
Response. On the 17th of April 1975, we heard a radio broadcast from Phnom Penh concerning what being said on this. But a few days later, I had no access to such a Phnom Penh radio channel anymore because there was no such reception. And I heard about this based on word of mouth, and it proves to be correct. Siu Heng's wife was taken away, and that Khmer Rouge asked me to work at hospital P2, and on in the afternoon, or at noon rather, I would pay a visit to Siu Heng's house and met his wife with children at home. With regard to Achar Sang, he was also taken away, but I did not know who ordered his removal.
You say you did not know who ordered his removal. Yesterday, you later stated that you later learned that it was an order of the upper echelon. Is it fair to say that since you did not know who had ordered the removal of Achar San, that you're also speculating or assuming as to who ordered him to be removed?
Response: I didn't assume at all. But the fact is that the order was made from the upper echelon. People would just tell you that they did not know about this, or they would choose to say that the order was made from the upper echelon.
You say you did not assume at all. You said the order was made from the upper echelon. Who made the order in the upper echelon?
Response: I do not think I know about this, but your question would be directed to the Khmer Rouge themselves because this language was those used by the Khmer Rouge.
Then, if you do not know who ordered the removal of Achar San, would you not say that you are assuming that there was an order from the upper echelon?
Response: I still understand that it was the order by the upper echelon of the Khmer Rouge. And when it comes to upper echelon, it is the language the Khmer Rouge used, because every time they every time they talk to us, they would just refer to the order and instruction received by the upper echelon. Perhaps they try to evade the responsibility, and every member or every Cambodian citizen during that time learned this very well, that any order would have been made by upper echelon, because the Khmer Rouge used this term every now and then.
So is it then fair to say that you base your answer on your understanding of the system that was in place during the Khmer Rouge?
Response: Yes, it is part of the system applied during the Khmer Rouge.
I will leave this topic for now and move on to a next topic, and that is your time at the Prek Luang Hospital. It was in May till July 1975, and you describe, and I will paraphrase, that Mitsu had ordered for all physicians and a small number of nurses and midwives to work in the hospitals. And your friend, Mr. Takwe, asked you to pack and to go with him back to Battambang and to also fetch Dr. Ni Cham. Is that correct? Did indeed Mitsu issue orders to call all physicians and a small number of nurses and midwives to work in the hospitals?
Response: Yes, it is correct. People were asked to work at Prek Luang Hospital. Letter were issued from Comrade Su asking me to work at Prek Luang Hospital. However, before I had to work at Prek Luang, I was asked also to get another physician at a village to work with me.
And when you say that people were asked to work in Prek Luang Hospital, do you mean medically trained personnel that was asked to work at the hospital?
Response. At Prek Luang Hospital, it was a former high school. It was a school for sure. The school was closed, and then they converted the school into the hospital, and we did not have enough facility or medical equipment for our medical purposes.
My question was slightly different. Mitsu ordered physicians and a small number of nurses and midwives to work in the hospitals. You went to Prek Luang Hospital. Dr. Ni Cham came to work in the hospital. Did other doctors come to work in the hospital with you?
Response. At Prek Luang Hospital, I was joined by another physician, Kum San, whose name also appeared on the list of the prisoners list at Tua Slang, and physician Ni Chom, and a dentist and a nurse. Altogether, there were 4 medical personnel. Apart from these 4 people I knew, the rest was the Khmer Rouge medical staff.
And speaking about Prek Luang Hospital, this was a hospital meant for civilians, am I correct?
Response. Prek Luang Hospital was a district-level hospital open to treat civilians.
And you have stated in your book that for those patients who were really sick, you ordered the right drugs. Where were these drugs found?
I did not know where these medicines were obtained in the first place, but there was a warehouse, the medicine warehouse, under the supervision of the director of the hospital, but I did not know where they had obtained those medicines from.
So, in that Khmer Rouge hospital, you treated patients and you managed to order the right drugs that were meant for civilians. Is that a correct statement as far as Prek Luang Hospital is concerned?
That is correct.
And moving on to your time at the military hospital, P2. You were there in July 1975 until October 1976. Do you remember some of the names of the physicians working there with you?
I had worked at Tribunal Hospital for about 2 months. Then I received a letter from the Deputy Commander of Sector 3, and this letter designated me to work in P2 military hospital. And in this particular hospital, I was the only physician over there, and others were Khmer Rouge medic. But as for the personnel of the hospital, they were divided into 2 groups. One were male medics and medical personnel, and the other were the female medical personnel. But those people were categorized based on their family background. For example, some would be placed in one group who were the sons or daughters of the Khmer Rouge cadres, and other was the son or daughters of other people, ordinary people. And as for myself, I was assigned to the groups of the medical personnel who were from the people's background. And when I was there, I did not hold any position. I was the rank and file personnel over there, and I also consider myself as one of the prisoner myself over there. But at that time, whenever there were any technical problems, for example, when they needed a certain physician in order to treat certain disease, then they would call upon me to examine and treat those patients.
Ask you to keep your answers a bit short. Time is of the essence. So I want to move on to a next topic. And you have discussed it briefly in your book, and you have briefly spoken about it on Monday. And it's experimental surgery. And you said a few things about the topic yesterday, but my question to you today is, did you ever personally witness experimental surgery by any Khmer Rouge official or medical staff? So I am not talking about what people have told you. I'm not talking about what you may have read somewhere. I'm talking about whether you personally have seen experimental surgery conducted by the Khmer Rouge, or perhaps, that is a possibility, participated in it.
Yesterday, I also testified on this issue. There was a case when a lady was injected with...
I'm going to interrupt you here. We heard what you stated yesterday. My question is simple. Did you personally see experimental surgery being conducted, or did you perhaps participate in experimental surgery?
I would like to ask you back. Your question was that whether I saw or witnessed the surgery experiment, but which instance did you refer to? Are you asking me about the lady whom I said yesterday was injected with anesthetic, or you were talking about experiment in general, surgical experiment at that time in general?
Experimental surgery as conducted by the Khmer Rouge, and you have spoken about this issue in your book, and it relates to experiments that were allegedly conducted with people being operated upon while still alive for training purposes.
I never witnessed this experimental surgery, and neither did I participate in this experiment, because my expertise was not in anesthetic medicine.
Thank you. I move on to the next topic, and that is the incident that was also discussed yesterday by the co-prosecutor, and it was at the time where you went with Chan, who was a former teacher of the fine arts, to go to Mount Rosé town. And I apologize for the pronunciation, but I want to read a part of this segment to you. It is Khmer ERN 00369-705. My apologies, that's the English ERN. And the Khmer ERN is 00678-789. And I will read. After lunch, I invited Chan to make a stroll along the river back to Mount Rosé town. An old man waved at me. I approached him. "What are you doing here?" "I accompany the band of artists," I replied. "Please take this sticky rice cake," he said while handing it to me. We thanked him and continued our way until we reached the National Road 5. Our truck driver was sitting on a big rock near a destroyed bridge. I was embarrassed by a stink smell. Before April 17th, 1975, Mount Rosé was a fierce battlefield. Noticing my uncomfortable behavior, the driver said, "Many people were killed in this area, and the decomposed bodies are still around." End of quote. And I have a little bit of trouble understanding the passage, so I want to make sure I understand it correctly. Am I correct in understanding that you state that the bodies you smelled, or at least the bad smell that was at that place, were the bodies of soldiers that had been killed in combat before April 17?
Yes, that is correct. At Mount Rosé, there was one barrack known as Banti Swai, and before they took over Bat Nambong city, the Khmer Rouge soldier destroyed this barrack, And the battlefield at the time was very fierce. Even the brick houses in Montreuil were damaged by artillery and gunfires. And then they fought their way all the way to Bat Dambong city. And when I was about to reach a river stream, I could smell the decomposed bodies. It's thing, and people around me told me that there were dead bodies from the fighting, and some of them were not yet removed. That's why I could smell the stink.
And were those bodies belonging to both Lon Nol soldiers and to Lon Nol soldiers and Khmer Rouge soldiers, as far as you can tell?
What I could say was that those were the dead bodies of the Lon Nol soldiers, and some were Khmer Rouge soldiers, and some were even ordinary citizens. Because the battlefields in Mong Rusei was fierce, and some civilians were also killed in that battle.
And do you know what happened to those bodies? Do you know whether they were buried or whether something else happened to those bodies?
That I did not know.
Did you have experience, perhaps as a doctor, what people would do with the bodies of soldiers that died in combat before April 1975? Were they all buried in individual graves, or were they perhaps assembled in mass graves?
I did not witness how they treated those bodies, but by Cambodian tradition, the dead body would be cremated. Generally, dead body would be cremated in the crematory lot in the pagoda.
And do you know whether that happened with all the bodies of soldiers that were killed in combat?
I did not know it all, and I did not see everything either at that time.
In your book, you speak about another event, and it can be found on English, ERN 00369-813, Khmer ERN 00678-932, and you write, another tragic event took place in 1982. It was the infamous strategic K5 plan that was twice longer than the Khmer Rouge time and took lives of many hundreds of thousands of people throughout the country. End of quote. So, according to you, the K5 plan took the lives of many hundreds of thousands of people throughout the country. Do you know where these people were buried?
I think that you are deviating from the topic because if I understanding correctly, your question should be within the confine of the 1975 to 1979, and now you are moving to 1982. President, witness needs not answer this question because the question is relevant.
Mr. Witness, can I ask you who has told you that you need only answer questions within the confines of 1975 to 1979?
I know the temporal jurisdiction of this court, that is the crimes that took place in 1975 through 1979. That's what I have known. But if the President so directs me to respond to the question, I would do so. I will take the direction from the President, and if this is not the President, I have already ruled on this issue. You need not answer to this question because it is not within the confines of the current case.
In document D140/1/1, which is the demographic expert report by Eva Thabot, the following is stated. It is unquestionable that the data from the DC-CAM mass grave mapping are an essential source on victims of the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia. Thus, using this data for an estimate of victims not only makes a lot of sense, but is important and needs to be done. It is unquestionable that a vast majority of victims in the mass graves, if not all, are Khmer Rouge victims. Also in that report, Eva Thabot states that she is not aware of any other incident in Cambodian history that caused massive loss of life. So it is clear that she is not familiar with the K5 episode, which, according to this witness, has cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. K5 took place especially around the region of Battambang, and for that reason, it is likely that people that died in K5 or under the K5 project ended up in mass graves simply because there were hundreds of thousands of them. So it is a relevant question whether this witness knows where these bodies were disposed of, the K5 victims, simply because we need to know what the source is of these bodies in the mass graves, especially around Battambang. So in this exceptional situation, a question outside the temporal jurisdiction of this court is appropriate simply because it goes to direct evidence. It provides.
The President. Witness needs not answer this question because the defense himself understands it very well, and he has also made it clear that it is not within the temporal jurisdiction of the ECCC.
But I will ask for a better reasoned order than that it's not in the temporal jurisdiction. I'm claiming, the defense is claiming, that hundreds of thousands of victims were not killed by the Khmer Rouge, but by the K5 plan instead. It's an alternative theory. This witness has relevant information. He speaks of hundreds of thousands of people that were killed. It simply is relevant and it is exculpatory, and we need to be allowed to pursue this. And simply pointing at the temporal jurisdiction will not do in this instance, Mr. President, with all due respect.
The President, we have listened to your own explanation that it is outside the temporal jurisdiction of the ECCC. So it is very clear now that it is not relevant. That's why the chambers advise you not to ask any question that is not within the confine of the current case. You may put the questions that is within the confine of case 002/01. Now the witness is testifying on two aspects, the evacuation as well as the application of local policy. And I made it clear from an outset of the topics of his testimony. So all parties were advised to put the question relevant to these topics with the witness at question. So the question you put just now to the witness is beyond the scope of case 002/01, and in addition it also goes out of the topics that the witness before us may has the capacity to testify before the chamber.
Mr. President, I will move on. I will simply for the record state that it is within the knowledge of this witness. He has actually written a book about it. And simply being outside
the President, you move on. If you do not have any further questions, we may hand over the floor to the other defense team. So move on, please.
I will move on to the next topic, as I'm prevented from pursuing this exculpatory line of questions. You have stated, Mr. Witness, that the district was far from my location. You were testifying about this when you were describing the structure of the DK regime. And could you provide some explanation as to what you mean when you say the district was far from my location?
We look at the administrative structure of the Khmer Rouge. It goes as follows. There is a village structure, a commune, district, sector, and zone. At the district level, the district office is far from the village where I resided. That's what I meant. Actually, it was not too far. But the administrative structure that is close to the people was the commune committee.
So, did you know what was happening at the district office during the democratic Cambodia?
No, there was no way I could know about it, because at that time we did not have the liberty to move around. We could not move out of our village at our own. Otherwise, we would run an inherent risk. So we had to stay in our own village.
Thank you. In your book, you speak on 2 occasions about brainwashing by the Vietnamese authorities. And you mention 3 Cambodian government officials that went on a brainwashing session in Vietnam. And you yourself state that you went to a 6-month political training, which was just a brainwashing course. And I'm quoting, it was just a brainwashing course. And it can be found on English ERN 00369-807, Khmer ERN 00678926. Again, I repeat, 00678926. And also Khmer ERN 00678933. Can you tell us what the Vietnamese tried to teach you in those brainwashing courses?
The President, Mr. Witness, please hold on. International Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Your Honours, my learned friend is not directing us to a specific passage, but if I'm not mistaken, this deals with events well outside the scope of the trial and after the Democratic Kampuchea period. I see no relevance to this line of questioning, and on that basis we would object.
Mr. President, I will, for the benefit of the prosecution, read out the relevant passage on English ERN 00369814, and it states, 1986, after returning from the 10th course of a 6-month political training at Ta Duc, Vietnam, which was just a brainwashing course, I traveled by car to To Nam Sap in Bovel district. End of quote. And obviously, this is relevant. It goes to the credibility of this witness and other witnesses. And the witness indicates that the Vietnamese were in the business of brainwashing, and it related to political issues. We have always maintained that part of the reason why the focus of this case is on only these few defendants has been Vietnam's desire, and later the CPP's desire, to hold only a few people accountable for these crimes rather than larger parts of the population. In other words, the Vietnamese had an agenda, and that agenda influenced their actions. And we are not alone in this. David Chandler, in his writings, acknowledges this. And now we hear from this witness, or from his writing, that these Vietnamese have been involved in political brainwashing, and this is obviously relevant. It's about the credibility of this witness, of other witnesses, and it relates directly to sources of knowledge. We need to know whether the Vietnamese perhaps educated people like this witness on their version of the facts of the 1970s. We need to know whether they were fed information, and here we have a witness who can testify, who can explain what the agenda of the Vietnamese was and what these brainwashing sessions consisted of. And we are not making up that word. It's the witness that speaks of brainwashing. If we have a witness, any witness in any court in the world, that indicates that he has attended brainwashing courses, it is relevant. It goes to the credibility of this witness. It goes to his sources of knowledge. And the defense must be allowed to further explore this issue. It doesn't get more fresh than brainwashing, I would say.
Mr. President, if I may be heard as well, because this issue touches upon us as well, let me just supplement. The gentleman here has indicated that 25 years after the events, he began writing a book. 25 years. Also in his testimony, he's indicated that he didn't consult any material. This was purely from his brain. He admits in his book of the Vietnamese brainwashing him, or at least attempting to brainwash him, speaking all sorts of things about the Chinese, the Kampuchea Krom, and what have you. Now, clearly, we should be able to explore what sort of brainwashing might have occurred, because it does, or it may have impacted the way he views things 25 years later when he sits down to draft. And with respect to the objection that was raised earlier, that we cannot go beyond the temporal jurisdiction, on August 6, 2012, witness Sun Sakun was asked to comment, or was permitted to discuss matters that went beyond 1979. And so when it is pertinent and relevant, the trial chamber has been flexible and has been very realistic in allowing the parties to go beyond the 75 to 79. So I think this is very relevant. It goes to the credibility and the sources of knowledge in writing this book. Thank you.
President, International Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm on my feet in light of the additional submissions put forward by my learned friends. If there was a legitimate basis, to question the witness's bias, to question inconsistencies in his evidence, if there was any shred, however remote, of evidence that his recollections had been affected to this point, we may not have objected. But this is a wild claim that because of alleged policies of other world governments, including China and Vietnam, in the 1980s, that because of those policies, because of a session this witness actually dismisses as brainwashing, and because of a claim that has basically no foundation in fact, and of course does not present a legitimate defense for Nuon Chea or for Ieng Sary, it's simply not proper for the defense to explore these types of avenues. If there was a proper basis, if there was a proper foundation, we would not have objected. It is not sufficient simply for the defense to say, because we say that a certain government was involved in setting certain policies, therefore we should be able to pursue whatever questions we wish with this witness, whether or not a legitimate foundation arises from his evidence that we've been hearing over the last 2 days. So we would invite Your Honours to sustain the objection and to stop this line of questioning.
Mr. President, if I may respond to the prosecution's reply to my colleague, Michael Carnevas, very briefly. We submit that there is a basis, because the basis is the witness states that he has been attending brainwashing sessions, and these brainwashing sessions related to political issues. This case is a political case, partly. Second point, it is not just this witness. It is irrelevant for this part of the argument, at least, whether this witness has been effectively brainwashed. It is important that brainwashing sessions apparently took place. The Vietnamese were in the business of brainwashing Cambodians at the time, and he writes this in his book. He says that 3 other officials attended brainwashing sessions in Vietnam. This is not the defense making this up. It's this witness testifying from his own experience. So it is obviously relevant to see what these brainwashing programs in Vietnam consisted of. This witness can explain, and he might be one of the very few witnesses in the world that can explain what these brainwashing sessions consisted of, also for these other officials.
The President, Judge Cartwright, you may now proceed.
Thank you, President. The Chamber has decided to ask a few questions directly to this witness, and you may be seated while we do that. Thank you, Mr. Poe. The judges of the trial chamber would like you to confirm that you did indeed use the term brainwashing sessions. That is the first question.
Response. Your Honours, in my last, in the book, I wrote about what happened as well after 1979. I may wish to refer to the book as reference because I may forget the terms I use. Yes, in 1979, I was assigned to attend a political studies session for 6 months with officials in Phnom Penh and from other parts of the country. It was a political studies session, and for me, I indeed say that that session is more or less like a brainwashing session. But this political session did not influence my writing as what the counsel for Mr. Nuntia indicated.
Well, thank you. That was to be my next question, which was with what assessment of the impact of these sessions do you believe they had on you? And you've, I think, just answered that. Was there any further matter that any judge wished to pursue on this? And I think that the Chamber has agreed that any questions about the subject matter of these sessions is irrelevant to the facts that we are concerned with in case 002001. Thank you, President.
The President, it is now appropriate time for the adjournment. We will adjourn for 15 minutes. The next session will be resumed by 3 o'clock. Court officer is now instructed to assist the witness during this recess.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រុមឈប់